Hi, Ben here from Trident Fly Fishing, and today I'm back to talk to you about fly lines, and in particular, how to choose the right fly line for every situation. Now, before we get started, I wanted to let you know that this video is going to be geared towards the beginning angler. So if you've never bought a fly line before, or if you're looking to maybe dial in your fly line a little bit better, if it's not casting quite as well as you want to, this is going to be the right video for you. The other thing that we're not going to be covering today is going to be spey lines. We'll have a video about that later in the year, but now let's get started. The number one most important factor when selecting a fly line is selecting the right line weight. And thankfully, fly line manufacturers and rod designers have made it really pretty easy. And really quickly, line weight refers to the weight in grains of the first 30 feet of the fly line. If you want to know more about line weight, we've got a whole video about choosing the right line weight for your fly rod where we go into a lot more depth about it. We'll put that link in the description for you. But when it comes to fly lines, we're going to keep it really simple. If you have a 6-weight rod, choose a 6-weight line. And the second factor for choosing the right fly line is going to be temperature. And in general, cold water, like this one here, and tropical, like this one here. And really what that boils down to is fly line manufacturers have designed lines to work better in certain temperature ranges. To date, I have not seen a fly line that works well from -20 to 120. But determining the temperature is usually pretty simple. Most tropical lines will say something like tropical right on the box. But if they don't say it right up front, go to the back of the box. It's usually going to tell you a temperature range. Similarly, a cold water line will either indicate that it's designed for cooler temperatures or have a trout on the box or something like that. Now, why don't you want to use a cold water line in warm conditions? Well, simply put, cold water lines will just get kind of gummy and rubbery in those warmer conditions. Similarly, tropical lines will get really tangled up in those colder conditions, and they're just not designed to work well outside of their specified temperature range. Now, the next question you're probably asking yourself is, what is a cold temperature versus a warm temperature versus a hot temperature? Generally speaking, if you're wading or fishing from shore, a hot or warm temperature is going to be anything where the water temp is above, let's say, 70 degrees. Somewhere in that 65 to 70 degree range is when you're going to want to switch from a cold water line to a tropical line. If you're fishing from a boat, the ambient air temperature and really the temperature of the boat deck is what's going to matter most. And it's going to be that same sort of 70-ish degree range when you're going to want to make that switch. Now, the third factor to consider when choosing your fly line is going to be the sink rate. And if you're just getting started into fly fishing, you're looking for the most versatile line for general trout, bonefish, most types of fly fishing, you're going to want a floating line. On your fly line at your fly shop, this is going to be designated with an F at the end. So when you see the line weight, it's going to say something like WF, which stands for weight forward, 8, which is the line weight, and F at the end, which is going to stand for floating. Now, your floating line is going to be your most versatile option. It's great for trout fishing because you can throw a dry, you can throw a nymph, you can throw a streamer. And really, it's going to be great for a huge range of fly fishing. And floating lines are sort of the essence of what fly fishing is all about. As you start to get deeper into the sport, you're going to find situations where a floating line just isn't the right choice. And that's why manufacturers make lines in all kinds of different types and densities. So the next one I want to talk about is the sink tip. And generally speaking, sink tips are going to be used in rivers. So sink tips, like the title, have a sinking tip. But what's more important is they have a floating running line. That makes picking up that line out of the water a lot easier if you're on a river or sometimes if you're fishing in the salt. This is going to be a great choice for you. And usually you're going to use a sink tip line when fishing streamers, but some people will like to nymph with the sink tip line as well. And of course, if you're fishing for really big game like tuna or billfish, you're probably going to be fishing a sink tip there as well. And that's going to give you that extra depth that you need when you're stripping a fly really, really fast behind a barely moving boat. Up next is the intermediate line. An intermediate usually means a sink rate of about 1.5 inches per second. And that's going to vary a little bit by manufacturer, but essentially an intermediate is a pretty slow sink. This is going to be great for a lot of saltwater applications when you're fishing a bait fish pattern and you want to just get it below the surface. And a full intermediate line, where the running line is also intermediate, is going to be great for surf fishing because that running line is going to sink below the waves and you're not going to get the same sort of wave action on your fly. The other application for intermediate lines is going to be lake fishing. When you're fishing a little nymph or something like that and you want to get it a foot or so below the surface to those hungry trout, intermediate can be a great choice.
I wanted to briefly interrupt this review to let you know that this video is supported 100% by your purchases at Trident Fly Fishing. So if you're in the market for some new tackle, check us out at tridentflyfishing.com.
And last but not least are the full sinking lines. And full sinking lines are great for fishing really, really deep in any situation. But generally, you're going to see those in lakes. This line here is a sink 6, which means it sinks at 6 inches per second. And I like to think of inches per second as sort of the feet of depth that you're going to be fishing in. This 6 inch per second line, I can sort of reasonably fish this at about 6 feet of depth. Of course, you can strip it really fast and fish it much higher in the water column, or wait half an hour and fish it at 100 feet down if you want. But these full sinking lines are getting a lot more specialized, and they're probably not going to be the right choice for your first or second fly line. Now, our fourth factor in choosing a fly line is going to be the taper. And the taper is essentially how the weight is distributed along that line. Many fly line manufacturers will actually post a diagram of that taper on the back of the box. In recent years, manufacturing processes have gotten a lot more advanced and tapers have become very, very complicated. And the best thing that you can do is go out there and cast the taper that you want before you fish it. But the reality for most of us is that that's not going to be reasonable. And so we've actually done a lot of work in our fly line shootouts. And again, click the links in the description below to read them if you're interested. We've done the work for you and gone out and cast lots and lots of lines so we can tell you exactly which tapers work well on which types of rods. But to break this down into something that's easy to understand, shorter heads and more weight forward heads are going to be easier to cast. They shoot better and they deliver heavier flies with ease. And those short-headed lines, like this outbound short, they're going to be great for fishing streamers and saltwater, and generally for new anglers if you're getting into the sport. And the contrast to this outbound short is going to be something with a really long head, like this 50-foot Royal Wolf long belly. Now, you're really going to be looking for presenting light flies very delicately. And they're also a lot better at aerializing lots and lots of line. Just keep in mind that they are going to be a lot tougher to cast, and generally we don't recommend using a very long head for a beginning angler. That's been a lot of material so far, but I did want to cover a couple of other points that are worth considering as you're choosing your new fly line. First up is material, and here we've got an airflow line which is made of polyurethane, which is just going to be a lot more environmentally friendly than the PVC lines that all of these other manufacturers are using. And the next thing to consider is going to be what's known as a welded loop. And a welded loop is simply a loop on the end of your fly line that you can use to connect your fly line to your leader or your fly line to your backing, or ideally both. And welded loops are fantastic. They just work really, really well for anything up through very, very, very big game situations. They make life easy. Get yourself a welded loop. Now, another thing that you're probably going to come across as you're shopping for fly lines is textured fly lines, like this Amplitude MPX right here. And textured fly lines are designed to reduce the drag as the fly line goes through the guides. Theoretically, that's going to make you cast a little bit further. In practice, the jury's still out on that. But what the jury's not out on is that these lines are going to be louder. And they just make more noise going through the guides, and I actually don't mind it because it provides a little bit of extra feedback, but for some people, it's like nails on a chalkboard. The next thing to think about is going to be stretch and cores. And lines like this airflow line are going to be designed on a low stretch core. And really what that means is it's just not going to stretch that much as you pull on it. Frankly, as a beginner, I would not spend a whole lot of time thinking about stretch, low stretch, and really cores in general. However, the important thing to note is that if you do go with a low stretch line, it is going to feel a little bit heavier than that same taper in a traditional core. So a Rio Elite Gold will feel a little bit heavier as you're casting it than, say, a Rio Premier Gold. Next up is going to be coatings. Rio has a coating called Slick Cast. SA has a coating called AST Plus. And basically what these coatings are designed to do is make you cast a little bit further and make that line last longer. Again, we haven't really been able to test this, but that's the theory behind it. And last but not least, I wanted to mention clear lines, which can really give you an edge when you're fishing for spookier game. Now, hopefully you know exactly how to pick the perfect line for you. But if you don't, check out our fly line shootouts. Again, they've got a lot of great recommendations and lots of detail if that's what you're into. If you're not, we're gonna leave you with some really simple recommendations. If you're a trout angler with a fast action rod, you're gonna wanna get an SA MPX. Again, match the line weight on the box to the line weight of your rod. If you're fishing a softer rod, we really like Rio Gold. It's just a great all-around taper. For tropical saltwater fishing, like bonefish, tarpon, and permit, SA Grand Slam is a really phenomenal taper. It's easy to cast into the wind, and it's easy to cast a big crab fly. And last but not least, if you're fishing for cold saltwater species like striped bass here in Maine, we recommend either SA Titan taper or an outbound short or some other taper that's going to be very short and designed for cold water. And of course, we've got a great video on how to choose a striper line if you're so inclined. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have questions about fly lines, we've got a whole team here at Trident ready to answer them. Give us a call anytime at 888-413-5211 or email us 24/7 at support@tridentflyfishing.com. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel where we've got lots of great videos coming out soon. And let me know by leaving a comment in the box below what your favorite fly line is. I'm Ben. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.